The Galactic Senate hung like a crystalline spider in the void, its transparent chambers orbiting the azure fire of Kepler 442. Through the curved walls, 1,000 alien forms cast their shadows, serpentine Zephyrians, coiled around hoverplat, crystalline Vorthok, clicking in harmonic clusters, the towering Kithmori, with their forearms spread in theatrical dismissal. At the chamber's heart stood Ambassador Marcus Chen, Earth's final voice in a galaxy that had grown tired of listening. His weathered face remained stone still as laughter rippled through the assembly's symphony of clicks, hisses, and harmonic trills that somehow managed to sound universally condescending. The human speaks of consequences. Senator Expanse's voice boomed through the translation matrix, his 6 eyes gleaming with amusement. The Hegmark's scaled form dominated the central dais, his words dripping with millennia of accumulated arrogance. Tell us, little ambassador, what will your dying world do? Send more trade proposals, more pleas for basic resources. Chen's hand moved slowly to the datapad at his side. The chamber's acoustics carried his voice to every corner, every species, every smug face that had voted to strangle humanity's expansion. You were warned, Senator. Project Leviathan is not a bluff. The laughter doubled. Even the normally stoic, ethereal collective beings of pure energy housed in containment suits flickered with what could only be interpreted as the mockery wasn't new. For 3 centuries, humanity had crawled from star to star, begging for scraps. Trade sanctions had turned Earth's colonies into ghost towns. Resource embargoes had forced entire human settlements to cannibalize their own ships for parts. The galaxy had watched as proud human explorers were reduced to scavengers, their technological advances dismissed as crude imitations of superior alien designs. Chen remembered the Tau Ceti massacre 2 million colonists who had starved when the Zephyrian Trade Consortium simply stopped delivering food shipments. The aliens had shrugged off humanity's protests with the bureaucratic indifference of gods swatting flies. He remembered the lunar station incident, when Kethmori peacekeepers had vaporized humanity's first deep space research facility for unlicensed quantum experiments. The research had been into terraforming technology that could have saved millions. But it was the Proxima Centauri Accord that had truly broken humanity's spirit. 57 nations, representing every major power block on Earth, had signed away their right to colonize beyond a 20-light-year radius from Sol. In exchange, the galaxy had promised protection and guidance. What they delivered was systematic starvation and technological stagnation. The motion passage. The Senate's AI announced in its crystalline voice. Proposal 7749. Complete trade embargo of the Terran system, pending compliance with Galactic Resource Management Protocol 12. Vote tally: 847 in favor, 23 opposed, 51 abstentions. Chen felt the weight of those numbers. 40 billion humans condemned with a simple majority vote. The math was elegant in its cruelty. Expanse's scaled face split into what might have been a smile on a creature with human features. On him, it looked like a predator bearing fangs. Perhaps now the humans will learn their place. The galaxy has evolved beyond the need for aggressive expansion. Your species lacks the wisdom for true civilization. The chamber erupted in approval, a cacophony of alien voices celebrating humanity's death sentence. But Chen noticed something else: the absence of fear. For all their power, for all their technological superiority, not one of them considered humanity a threat. They saw Earth as a petulant child throwing a tantrum, not a wounded animal backed into a corner. That was their first mistake. Chen activated his datapad with deliberate precision. The device's screen flickered with authentication protocols that reached across 43 light-years to confirm his identity. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, buried in facilities that had been carved from solid granite over the course of 2 centuries, machines began to hum. Transmission authenticated, he said quietly. Authority code, Omega 77 Tango. Execute contingency Phoenix. The chamber's translation matrix carried his words to every delegate, but their meaning was lost in the alien languages. Chen could see confusion rippling through the assembly. Excalan leaned forward, his 6 eyes narrowing. What gibberish do you speak? Human? Chen looked up from his datapad, and for the first time since entering the chamber, he smiled. It was the smile of a man who had spent his entire career being polite to his murderers, who had translated death sentences into diplomatic language, who had watched his species burn while maintaining perfect protocol. It was the smile of a man who was done. "I'm telling my people to stop playing nice." 300 light-years away, in the dead space between the Perseus and Orion arms, something ancient began to stir. It had been sleeping for 78 years, patient as stone, drawing power from the cosmic background radiation and the slow decay of quantum vacuum. It had been built in secret, constructed from technologies that humanity had never shared with the galaxy, powered by principles that would have terrified the Senate's greatest scientists. Project Leviathan opened its eyes. The first sign was Satala gravitational anomaly, detected by Zephyrian deep-space monitors. The sensors registered it as a minor fluctuation, probably a rogue asteroid or comet. The technician who first noticed the readings dismissed them without a second thought. After all, what could possibly be dangerous about empty space? The second sign was the light, a pulse of energy that rippled outward from the anomaly, invisible to organic eyes, but blazing like a star to anyone scanning in the quantum spectrum. It lasted for exactly 1.3 seconds, long enough to reach the nearest galactic navy observation post and trigger every emergency protocol they had. By the time the third sign manifested, it was already too late. Admiral Vekvoren, of the Hegmark First Fleet, was in the middle of his daily briefing when his flagship's AI began screaming warnings. The massive dreadnought Inevitable Glory shuddered as its quantum sensors detected something that shouldn't exist, a mass signature larger than a small moon, accelerating through subspace at velocities that defied known physics. Report. Vekvoren's forearms spread wide as he barked the command at his bridge crew. "Unknown contact, Baron 27 Mark 8, his tactical officer replied, mandibles clicking with stress. "Mass estimate. ... Admiral, this can't be right. The computer says it's approximately 47 times the mass of our largest dreadnought." "Impossible." "Run the scan again." "I've run it 6 times, sir." "And Admiral. ... The tactical officer's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's headed directly for the Senate system." Back in the Senate chamber, Chun was calmly packing his datapad. The alien delegates had moved past confusion into active concern. Several species were known for their predictive abilities, and every one of them was suddenly looking very, very nervous. Ambassador Chun, Excalan's voice, had lost its mocking tone. "What exactly is this Leviathan you spoke of?" Chun finished securing his belongings and turned to face the assembled galaxy. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of accumulated rage, tempered by the cold precision of a species that had learned to plan in geological timescales. "Senator, your people have a saying. The small stones make no sound when they fall. You've spent 300 years treating humanity like small stones. You've starved our colonies, murdered our civilians, and stolen our future. You've done all of this because you believed we were harmless." He paused, letting the translation matrix carry his words to every corner of the chamber. "Leviathan is what happens when small stones grow tired of falling quietly." The first images reached the Senate chamber 18 minutes later. Emergency broadcasts from the Hegmark fleet showed something that defied easy description or structure that seemed to bend light around itself. It surfaced a shifting maze of angles that hurt to look at directly. It was impossibly large, larger than most space stations, and it moved with the inexorable certainty of a natural disaster. But it wasn't the size that terrified the watching aliens. It was the silence. No energy signatures, no communications, no responses to increasingly frantic hails from the approaching fleet. Leviathan simply existed, moving through space like a mountain might move through air, deliberately, and with absolute indifference to anything in its path. "Open fire," Admiral Vekvoren commanded. All ships, full spread. The Inevitable Glory and her escort fleet unleashed everything they had: quantum torpedoes that could crack planets, plasma beams that burned at stellar temperatures, gravitational disruptors that could tear apart the molecular bonds of matter itself. For 37 seconds, the space around Leviathan blazed with enough energy to power a small star. When the light faded, Leviathan was unchanged. Every weapon had simply passed through it, as if firing at a hologram, but the structure's response was immediate and devastating. A single pulse emanated from Leviathan's cornart energy, not matter, but something that existed in the spaces between atoms. It reached the Inevitable Glory in 0.3 seconds, and rewrote the fundamental constants of physics in a sphere roughly the size of the ship's primary hull. The dreadnought simply ceased, not destroyed, not vaporized it, simply stopped existing, leaving behind a perfectly spherical void that space itself seemed reluctant to fill. In the Senate chamber, the emergency broadcasts cut to static. 600 alien voices fell silent as the implications sank in. The Hegmark First Fleet, the most powerful naval force in the galaxy, had just been casually erased by something humanity had built in secret. Excalan's scared face had gone pale, his 6 eyes wide with a fear so primal it transcended species. This is impossible. Your species lacks the technology for no, Chen interrupted quietly. We lack the technology you know about, the technology you were willing to share with us, the technology you thought was safe to let us have. He gestured to the dead screens that had shown Leviathan's awakening. This is what happens when you force a species to develop in the dark. The chamber erupted in panic. Delegates who had spent centuries debating the finer points of trade, law were suddenly faced with the reality that they had misjudged humanity so completely that it might cost them everything. Emergency sessions were called. Battle fleets were mobilized, and messages flew across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. But Chun knew it was too late. Leviathan had been designed by humanity's best minds working in absolute secrecy for over 2 centuries. It incorporated technologies that the galaxy's scientists would need millennia to understand, assuming they survived long enough to study them. Phase-shifting matter that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Quantum cores that drew power from the zero-point field itself. Weapons that could edit reality at the subatomic level. All of it built from theories that humanity had developed, while the galaxy dismissed them as primitives and children. Esteemed delegates, Chen said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The chamber fell silent again. Every alien eye fixed on the human who had just revealed that their species possessed weapons of unimaginable power. 78 years ago, the Galactic Senate voted to limit human expansion to a radius of 20 light-years from Sol. You claimed it was for our own protection, that we needed guidance to become a truly civilized species. What you really wanted was to ensure that humanity would never pose a threat to your established order. He paused, letting the weight of their collective guilt settle over the chamber. You succeeded. The humanity you knew will never threaten you. But you made one critical error in your calculations. You assumed that the humanity you were trying to control was all that we were capable of becoming. The screens around the chamber flickered back to life, showing new images from the Senate system's defense perimeter. Leviathan had arrived, its impossible bulk blotting out the stars as it took position between the system's star and the Senate station itself. But it wasn't. Island smaller objects were detaching from its hull, each one roughly the size of a Hegmark cruiser. Phase 2, Chun said softly. Diplomatic escort. The objects spread out in a perfect sphere around the Senate station, their movements coordinated with mathematical precision. As they settled into position, they began to emit a low-frequency pulse that resonated through the station's superstructure. Every alien in the chamber could feel it in their bones, a reminder that they were surrounded, helpless, and entirely at humanity's mercy. But Leviathan itself had gone quiet again, its bulk hanging motionless against the stars like a monument to humanity's patience. It wasn't attacking, wasn't threatening, wasn't even communicating. It was simply ... waiting. What do you want? Excalan's voice was barely a whisper. Chen smiled again, but this time it was softer, almost sad. What we've always wanted, Senator: recognition, respect, the right to exist without your permission. He gestured to the screens showing Leviathan's quiet vigil. We're not here to conquer you or destroy you. We're here to ensure that the next time humanity speaks, the galaxy listens. The ambassador picked up his datapad and walked toward the chamber's exit. Behind him, 600 alien delegates sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted irrevocably. The Terran embassy will remain open, Chen said without looking back. When you're ready to negotiate as equals, we'll be waiting. As the doors closed behind him, the chamber remained silent. Outside, Leviathan continued its patient watch, a dark reminder that humanity had learned the galaxy's most important lesson. Respect was not given freely, it was taken, one calculated move at a time. In the depths of space, 43 light-years away, Earth began to broadcast on every frequency the galaxy had ever used. The message was simple, transmitted in 700 languages, and carried the quiet authority of a species that had finally stopped asking for permission. This is Terra. We are no longer your subjects. We are no longer your servants. We are your neighbors, and we expect to be treated as such. The age of humanity's silence is over. The galaxy listened, and for the first time in 3 centuries, it heard. On the observation deck of Leviathan, a single figure stood silhouetted against the stars. Admiral Sarah Chun, Marcus's daughter, architect of humanity's greatest weapon, and the woman who had spent her entire life preparing for this moment, watched the Senate station with eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. "Signal from the surface," her aide reported. "The Senate is requesting immediate talks." "Let them wait," she said softly. 78 years we've waited for justice. They can wait 78 minutes for our response." Below them, the galaxy held its breath and learned what it meant to fear the dark.